and once again, trying to get out of Crucible range at the end of the phase. Let's check in with our players now and see what they think about this matchup.
We treat every single team as an equal. We don't treat any other team if they were better or if they were weaker. We just want to get as much wins as we can. We're just going to try to study what they've been playing for the past week and see if we can just adapt to the playstyles and drafts. We can try to exploit some of the mistakes that they've been doing consistently, and we definitely want to take a match off one of the two top teams at this moment, just so that we don't look like a joke in the league. It's definitely possible, but it's definitely going to be a long road for this weekend.
Our matchups last week were very difficult. Both the opponents we played against brought their A game, and they look like really solid teams overall. I don't think that's really affected the mentality of our team. I think we're fine and we're ready to show up. This weekend, our matchup should be a lot easier than last week, but it doesn't mean we're sleeping on our opponents. We're still going to prepare because we know that they have the drive to win, and we're just going to make sure that doesn't happen. We want to come out of this weekend with a 3-0.
King Caffeine talking about how important it is to prepare for every single match. It's always been important to Gale Force that they prepare for every single opponent. And there have been a lot of rumors about Even and Death and how well they have been doing in scrims. First, we heard that, or I heard that from Goku when I talked to him in an interview. And then even, I believe it was somebody from Gale Force in a winner's interview talking about this match, that they feel like Even and Death, their scrims and how they've been doing there, they just haven't been able to transition to the next step of being able to perform competitively. But it seems like it's only maybe a matter of time.
Yeah, it's one of those cases where we hear enough through the word of mouth consistently enough that it seems a bit more than just like the go-to phrase to describe the team. You know, it's like everybody is suddenly going like, this squad should get a little bit more respect than maybe they're originally been given. And I'm excited to finally see that hopefully transition over towards the actual tournament day when things are going to matter. And they have, you know, improved. They've gotten more wins recently than they did early on.
Yeah, it was actually Casanova, now looking at my notes from No Tomorrow, who mentioned that. So it's only a matter of time. And there's a lot of overlap in favored heroes between these two teams. So we'll see how the drafts influence that. Maybe Gale Force eSports goes even further into their global game once again, since we know that Even and Death are still working on their macro game and trying to keep up with the map. And speaking of the map, our battleground pool for the Heroes Global Championship is ready, and the first battleground is Sky Temple, chosen by Even and Death. They've also banned Battlefield of Eternity, so Brax's Holdout could be a map that we go to later on.
Yeah, and the ban there on to the Dragonshire from Gale Force eSports. That is a map that Even and Death has shown to really adore. Sky Temple in both the small maps is really where I feel like Even and Death most of the time has been taking us, so it's no surprise that we're going to be starting off there. A lot of this series, no map is going to be a strong indicator, just because I feel like the gap and disparity of skill here. A lot of it just goes, can we find Even and Death? And they're going to be most likely on a map that they select. So starting with a skirmish-focused one here. But it's weird. The thing for Even and Death for me is a bit of consistency, I feel like is all it is, because they really do have signs and just moments. But that's the problem, is that they're merely moments of just absolute greatness. If they can translate that over to even just 30 seconds, I feel like suddenly a lot of people, especially for fans at home where it might be hard to see those small things, will go like, this is why, you know, everybody's kind of hyping it Even and Death.
The only thing I wanted to talk about for Even and Death is the difference of competition between Open Division and then here at the Heroes Global Championship. You have to play every single weekend. So even if you're a team that has a signature style, and we'll say for Even and Death, that's the double support Vala Illidan style, you have to be able to adapt, both constantly trying to figure out how you're going to adapt throughout scrims, but then also be able to adapt on the fly if you have something taken away from you, which we saw Illidan be banned against them in one of the games by Roll20.
Yeah.
And the ability to adapt is why teams like Gale Force have been able to maintain their great status, especially on Brax's Holdout, because they constantly are evolving those types of compositions, always evolving within it. So hopefully Even and Death is able to make the necessary adaptations to keep up with this kind of competition.
Looks like it's going to start off with an Uther. Nope, swapping it out. Still, you know, figuring it out down to the last 10 seconds here. Genji is off the table. So not surprised there, considering just the map, again, is very skirmish-focused, no macro. You aren't looking at wave clear as a major selling point, so Genji, just that mobility, he's very, very good at it. He's very good at the small skirmishes. and that's going to be taken away. So what do we see for Gale Force eSports? It is a new Barak is their first pick. I believe that's still holding true to what we've seen in the past.
Yeah, they've played a fair amount of Stitches as well, but for King Caffeine, actually, it's a lot more Stitches in Arthas than a new Barak,
Yeah,
but a new
that is
Barak
true.
is still up there as an available.
Yeah, that's one of those, but it's because, I mean, a new Barak's really, really good, right? Yeah, I agree. This is already a slight adjustment for Gale Force, the fact that a noob is picked up that high. It's not, again, that it gets out of their arsenal to be able to run it. Everybody at HGC can run a new Barak. It's just first pick, they normally would go to a different direction.
Isn't Fan the one who really keeps track of win rates?
I know that Fan definitely looks into it, but I don't know if on Gale Force specifically they have a player who over-focuses onto that.
I thought I remembered hearing that about him, but my point is that a new Barak he has a big disparity in his win rate based on first pick or second pick, making him, it's much better if you get him in the first pick position, so he's a good solo pickup to be able to have in that first pick position. So just getting an objectively strong pick here, but Even in Death gets their Illidan and one of the counters against it, Arthas, and one of the heroes that Gale Force likes to play with Michael Udall.
Yeah, I don't mind this transition for Even in Death. Also, when looking at the idea of just being able to get a win, I mean, Illidan oftentimes forces that composition where you're like, oh, I can't make a slight mistake against it, like Stitches. You can't make a slight mistake every 16 seconds. Illidan, that timer is a lot shorter. It makes you never able to kind of make the slight mistake. And so now suddenly I like this for Even in Death. I think it just greatly increases their team's chances being, again, more on the weaker side compared to GFE of winning a game.
Well, Gale Force, if they want to get Arthas here, could get Arthas as well as a potential damage dealer. Maybe a Li Ming.
The deny. We forget the high priority Arthas on the side of Even in Death. It's just that no longer is even an option for GFE. I'm sorry.
But Dahaka still is, though, and
Yeah.
that would be Michael Udall's next to go to.
Hey.
So they're going to get those two.
With the Uther there. So very generic, just strong picks. A little bit on the side of Gale Force. Even in Death, they've committed a little bit more. The Illidan and the Arthas is even that high up, I would say. Most of the time that we see that, unless you're in the first pick slot with 3 heroes, it does indicate quite a bit on your intent into the draft. So they've got to tread lightly onto the secondary ban. But most likely we're going to see focus on either to some form of supporting or a backliner, since we see both of the melees already locked in for Gale Force.
If Gale Force doesn't want to deal with Vala Ariel, now would be the time to ban one of those away.
Yes, very much so. And that's been such a staple for Even in Death, you know, and it makes sense that we would see Gale Force target it. I can also see Gale Force not targeting it, though. Kind of like that we're better than you mentality that we saw out of some of the other teams here. They ban out the Abathur. And also understandable, but I agree with you. I think I would have targeted a little bit more into the Ariel, just because that has been such a staple, but I don't mind letting it through because Gale Force, again, should feel so confident that you could look at this maybe even a challenge set, right? Where it's just kind of like, give them a little bit of what they want. We should be able to take them out. And the moment that the series maybe gets out of hand and it's even tied up or you're down 1 game, you go, okay, we're done with that. Time to commit to the drafting that we consider most optimal for this matchup. A lot of time being taken here for Even in Death, though. That ban onto the Abathur, I feel like, wasn't that surprising.
There she is.
Okay, and it's going to be with a Brightwing. Another double support to be able to back up the Illidan. Neither has a very ideal heroic or supporting tool to be able to help out the Illidan, making this team fight counterintuitive a little bit and putting a lot of pressure on the Homicidal, who we expect to be onto the Illidan for Even in Death. He's got to be very self-efficient, self-sustaining when it comes to his HP and not rely on his supports to be able to aid him.
The one game so far that Even in Death have won in all of HGC was versus Superstars. It was on Sky Temple, and it had Ariel Brightwing Illidan.
Nice.
So it is something that at least they are very comfortable with, and that you can't ask for much more for that than them to be able to get all of their comforts like this, the way that they've been able to draft. If they were to get a win, it would be with that.
Yeah, I very much agree with you. It's kind of like one of those, no matter how staggered it is, this is really the kind of going to be the best odds for Even in Death here in Game 1, because the draft is looking powerful and comfortable on top of it. Falstad and Li Ming is the last 2 picks for Gale Force eSports. Falstad, man. Such an interesting hero in North America. We saw one day of high priority, and then he's kind of fallen out for a lot of the teams, but Gale Force still kicking it out.
Last pick, anything other than Vala? Potentially, the only other thing I could think of is maybe a Lunara for the Lunara-Illidan pairing. They have Arthas as their primary warrior, so she combos off of the slows from that if she wants to get unfair advantage. However, versus a Li Ming Falstad, she may feel like she has to take greater spell shield there at 13.
Man, I feel like, well, it doesn't even matter. I feel like Lunara, what I was going to say is overall the higher damage output to the point where I like it. But again, the vulnerability you can have into that Li Ming and the, a new Barak initiation, there's a lot of things to be very, very afraid of. And if you aren't very safe with your positioning, much like we saw, in the last series, you can easily get blown up onto that squishy Dryad.
There's a just slightly better win rate for Lunara than Vala. We're looking at 50% as opposed to 47% for Vala. So maybe they're going off of that. Well, Lunara statistically gives us the better odds for victory, but also she just, as we said, combos very well with an Illidan. She puts the poisons down. Illidan can be the cleanup crew that gets the kills along with it. And then if they want to be able to pair off of the slows of Arthas, there's that opportunity for that as well. Meanwhile, Gale Force eSports drafting a composition we know from them. They've got their couple of global heroes now. They've got Li Ming for damage too. K1 Pro has been a beast on Li Ming all of Phase 2.
I expect K1 Pro to kind of have a heyday here in this game. I don't feel like there's much else to say other than even in Death to draft a lot of what they want. It's the best odds. Again, you talked about the only win they've got was with near an identical composition, near the exact same map. The difference between the two is Superstars versus Gale Force. I mean, it's a pretty big skill gap, and I still weight this over to GFE no matter what the draft was going to be, but Even in Death has all their resources to be as best of odds as they can possibly get.
Well, we're ready for the game, so let's get right to it. Game number 1 between Even and Death and Gale Force eSports.
It's going to start with the underdogs. Even in Death, Battery is going to be on the Arthas. Lutano repping the Lunara. Howl is going to be on Ariel. Frozen X is the Brightwing. And last, we've got Homicidal on the Illidan.
Meanwhile, Gale Force eSports are in the red with Michael Udall playing Dahaka. Fan will be on the Li Ming this time. Anubarak played by King Caffeine. And with Fan playing Li Ming, that means we've got K1 Pro playing the Falstad. Finally, Akaface playing Uther.
I got to talk to a couple of members of GFE just lightly after their series against Team Freedom. And I know that their mentality definitely felt like they were trying to look for ways to be able to improve the aggression, be able to early game pressure, you know, never letting up of any form of an advantage. And so for this series, that's going to be a focus, not only because, again, I want a very dominant performance here from GFE if they're going to, we talked about it with the weighted series and everything, prove that they still have that strength. They're one of the powerhouses here in North America, but not letting go of that lead is going to be a really cool tool that hopefully they grow on.
Yeah, they should be able to use this match for more than just getting another victory to pad their stats within the standings, right?
Yeah.
They should be looking for ways that they can improve themselves in this series, and one of the ways they can do that is by putting on a lot of pressure, trying to make sure that they are pressing their advantages, because every match, every game is an opportunity to learn and grow as a team and as players when you look toward the international competition, where your competition gets way tougher.
We do see no more Season Markman here. It's still going to be the Gathering Storm for Falstad, and that has been a talent that's becoming more and more popular in the North American scene. Understandably so, this is not a map where traditionally you look at the global for its side soak capabilities. It's for its side shots, not getting the stack after stack over the long run, hoping for that 40 mark. And now we have our first temples. What is Gale Force going to be doing? Even in Death for now, started up on mid to Haka. It's Mike Udall there, securing the shots on top. In an ideal world, Gale Force should be looking to delay these shots in mid as much as possible, but they're really relying on the fact that they have that double global onto the off lanes.
It's really nice for Even in Death that they have this double support setup, because then they can leave Brightwing in the bottom as a counter to hold on to that lane, to the experience there, and be up against the global of Falstad. But then on the other side, still have a support to fight over the temple where they're at. And so far, Gale Force hasn't been willing to fight over delaying any of those shots. They're not taking any risks, so they're just going to trade out, and that does give them an edge here in the top lane, where they can have the global pushing along with potentially bruisers once they get to the second temple phase.
That's something that, if this was later into the game, I really do enjoy on the side of Gale Force eSports. But just mainly because Falset kind of hasn't hit the moment to where he can really overpower Brightwing. That's typically at the 7, getting the boomerang for your wave clear potential. I mean, you can always bully her in terms of the 1v1, but the reason why Brightwing is known as that placeholder laner as the solo is because her passive AoE healing, eventually, she just doesn't die. She's a good person to kind of keep there. And so I would have liked to see more offensive play until that window's hit, and then abuse the fact that we got the double global on the side of Gale Force and run that 1-3-1 that we saw displayed during the first phase.
Yeah, Gale Force eSports loves to play their global game. Getting 2 globals is exactly what I figured that we'd see Gale Force eSports do. Michael Udall had a great dodge on the Howling Blast, using the burrow to make sure they had that. And Gale Force is going to get the early Giants to push along with them in the bottom lane and take out the towers here, setting up for a great second temple phase.
This pressure so early on. I love this from Gale Force. This is exactly what we're talking about, though. They didn't display it in the first round phase. They're doing it with the Giants in between. Full 4-man collapse down here, trying to keep it up. And now that it's down, they cycle away. You know, it does remove a bit of a Knight potential play for Gale Force. And they do, in fact, have the global before Even in Death will. That's something that you would like to try and rely on, and Homicidal is kind of doing work knowing that he had the upper hand not only into the 1v1, but also having the camp early.
Well, making such a quick rotation, Michael Udall might be in trouble. Homicidal even diving in there. Has enabled Gale Force to rotate up now too. They haven't gone for the bruisers though. They want to try to get kills. King Caffeine has caught Frozen X. Frozen's does not have Blink Heal or anything like that, so the only hope is to try to phase shift away, and that will not complete. First blood for Gale Force eSports. We saw the bed of barbs. A lot of times, Anubaraks have been picking the full burrow charge build, but in this instance, getting bed of barbs for the additional slow and crowd control is going to help a lot, not only with Illidan, but also with Arthas against Even in Death later on in fights.
The shots on bottom, 25% have been secured for Even in Death. Brightwing teleporting in. That's going to be Frozen X healing things up. K1 Pro flying out towards mid, getting on the Homicidal there with the double global. Mikey Dahl, can he get the drag? He does, but does he get the kill? Very much going to be the case. Frozen X not making it there in time. And now Gale Force should be able to collapse. They actually are losing all the shots. Every single shot went over to Even in Death. Very impressive play here from Even in Death. So much so they have an experience advantage.
They do. They've been able to make the most of the fact that they lost those 2 kills and that Gale Force committed globals to those kills. Getting the temples, taking out the 4 in bottom, that's given Even in Death a structural lead over Gale Force eSports. Experience tied though. Even in Death don't want to lose out too many more of those kills though, because even if they can get other objectives, the respawn timers will only get longer and longer as the game goes on.
I'm a little bit scared for Gale Force eSports, Gilly. This is very, very passive for the first 2 phases. Like, so not only for the first one, like the rotation down with the Giants, I complimented it. I talked about it a little bit, and I really did enjoy that. But the fact that it's another case where K1 Pro was a global in the lane that, you know, everybody wanted to be in. If your idea was to side gank and then use the globals offensively, then K1 Pro's got to be up in the mid lane. You never want to use that for the kill elsewhere. So I'm not even saying that, like, obviously they're getting kills. The game is 50-50, and it's still very much Gale Force's game, like, in my opinion. But it's not nearly as clean as what I was aiming for, or at least what I would like to see.
Well, maybe it is just that it's the first game of the series. Gale Force did suffer a loss to Team Freedom. So they're giving their respect to Even in Death on Even in Death's battleground with Even in Death's composition. And EID now has Heroics. It is the hunt over Metamorphosis, Sleeping Strike 2 to try to guarantee their kills on people who get low. Holding on to the heroic ability for Brightwing, a potential for Emerald Wind to give them more boss control. The Divine Storm will help out for that on Gale Force eSports side. And looked like Li Ming and Brightwing were playing chicken, but in the end it was Emerald Wind.
Drag, stun coming out.
He's going to pop Army.
Aegis buys a bit of time, but I think he's going to be going down. No, the Emerald Wind. Cocoon's drop for King Caffeine. He gets hunted on Homicidal. Might be able to get the pick. Gust is not even going to save a soul. And now a new is down. King Caffeine going out a bit too far, and Even in Death squashes the bug.
Very well done from Even in Death to save Battery when it looked like he might go down. Now Homicidal needs someone to friend or foe to. He's going to jump over the wall and just barely makes it out alive. Gale Force eSports close to being able to get a kill to try to tie things back up, but this whole time, Even in Death have moved into position to start taking one of the 2 temples available.
And now Frozen X has the opportunity to teleport out whenever needed. This is a bit scary for him, though, because that is one of the matchups. So since there is a double global on the side of Even in Death, Gale Force, every time they see one of those shrines off on a different aspect of the map, they've got to be going, which global very much is that? If you don't have the eyes onto the Illidan, you should be assuming it's Illidan because he's more effective off on his own. Brightwing wants to be into the 4, and she doesn't win 1v1s, and that was exactly what I was thinking was going to happen. That's why you want the Illidan, is because at least he's got a chance. Brightwing, she just dies.
A lot of people moved off to the map. The best thing for Even in Death was to just give up that kill and force Dahaka off of the top temple. Get the rest of the shots here, and they will do so, and they actually get him off for more of the shots that Gale Force were able to push away Brightwing off of the bottom. So Even in Death are hanging into this game largely because they're doing something that we have praised Gale Force in the past, which is cutting their losses.
Yeah, and now Even in Death, though, is sacrificing only mid-tier kills on globals for a lot of shots. I actually feel like this is one of the few cases where that kind of all-inning the core, but it's going to be worth every suicide we've seen out of Even in Death. I do feel is a trade-up for the most part. And Gale Force hasn't had the opportunity to do much about that. The only way Gale Force can actually stop it is not being so late on these rotations. They are about 30 seconds behind every shrine on Even in Death.
It's an interesting approach when you think about the fact that Even in Death has drafted a double support with the carry, the Lunara, Illidan, and Arthas. You would think these 5 want to stay together, but they had to draft a composition that also could deal with Gale Force eSports and how they approach large battlegrounds. And in this sense, being able to get the hunt with Illidan and having Brightwing as the second support has let them be able to do that.
Yeah, if that is actually what Even in Death is trying to make happen, I'm beyond impressed.
Yes.
I've only seen one other team in the world that I think did it one time. Where they intentionally suicide a fight. It was E-Star at the mid-season brawl where they intentionally take a fight at one part of the map, 4 versus 5, because they know the trade-off of losing one hero is worth the slow stall out. But I don't know, right now it's just Gale Force again, kind of slow trying to find their way through, and Even in Death is making work of the map between their globals. Even so much so that, the Emerald Wind gained value into the last fight, catching out Battery. Gale Force just doesn't have the focus fire yet necessary to be able to win these fights yet. Talent tiers, though, are escalating, and that might change. Falsad and Li Ming get stronger and stronger. Brightwing gets a bit better when it comes to the CC post 16. But no huge power spike, I guess, for her, when it comes to survivability and sustaining through that damage.
Yeah, I would say for 16, looking at Even in Death, it's marked for death with Illidan, and then especially getting Will of Heaven to go along with Lunara, especially since she, again, went into unfair advantage. She has that extra damage whenever enemies are slowed from her poisons, and that pairs so unbelievably well with a Frozen Tempest from Battery. So in those 5v5 setups, things will look good for Even in Death as they're continuing on towards 16. But so too will Gale Force eSports, being able to get Benediction, even with the cooldown increase of that, being able to have the double whatever is needed for your team is so nice as a new Uther.
Double stun is normally what we see, but yeah, there are a lot of different iterations of that can be so impactful, especially with Guardian of the Ancient King and the level 1 talent that we see. But Battery's moved up. Hit a 2-man Howling Blast, pressure into King Caffeine, falling about 50%, and drawing heals there from Akaface. K1 Pro has kept himself on the bottom, and the fact that Even in Death is even, again, in the shot timing is really, really convenient for them. They are essentially trading positively into Gale Force eSports because they have the structural advantage in the long run.
Keep waiting to see where Caff is willing to strike with the Cocoon. Homicidal's going to hunt in and forces King Caffeine to burrow charge away. The Gale Force are just slightly ahead with 16. They're going to get those and immediately step onto this point. Even in Death, are they willing to bring in their Brightwing? Michael Udall's already there. The Cocoon has gone down. Lutano doing what he can with this poison to take it out. Gale Force eSports are ready to strike. They take out Arthas. They barely may take out How. They do get him as well.
Man, that was the last auto attack there for K1 Pro. Fan not able to get the Disintegrate. And a couple of shots remain still here on the middle part of the map. Gale Force eSports now is head almost an entire level when it comes to the experience with 2 members dead on Even in Death. They back out. They're going to be looking towards this boss. They may be able to, you know, aid alongside it and be able to pick up the bottom keep. But ultimately, it's kind of just whether or not they want to do that, or you can cycle through mid, take out the mid keep front wall. It's really just, do we think we can team fight them? Because you're against Anillion, the safer call here is to go mid. You don't risk the death chase potential of the composition that Even and Death has.
Yeah, there are a lot of different options that that Gale Force Esports can do along with this boss. The big thing comes down to the fact that Gale Force were able to force a fight with Cocoon before Even and Death had 16, just before, and Even and Death kind of waffled around that area. They didn't just want to give up the tempo in the shots, but instead ended up losing not only a lot of the shots, but the boss and potentially their keep as well.
All right, so moving up here to the keep. It's going to be going down pretty easily here. Nice little giants behind it, and it's going to increase the siege damage here on the bottom half. So first keep of the game over to Gale Force Esports. Still find themselves the full level. There's a chase between Akaface, Falset's flying in. K1 Pro is going to be there. They only have to interrupt the... he can teleport out. They have no CC. He's out. See you, nerds. Baby! That was such a big misplay by K1 Pro and a beautiful use of the teleport from Frozen X. I was just saying, the only thing you have to interrupt is the teleport. That's the only way Brightwing survives those type of circumstances.
Poor Brightwing. Thought she was going to be down, but she, in fact, was not out. And Gale Force Esports, though, they still have a big, significant lead, and that being that they're able to take out the first keep of the game. Only one temple activating in this next phase.
It looks like Gale Force has the positional advantage. They have control of the eye as well here, Gilly, which is really very useful. The reason why the eye is so impactful with this top shrine is mainly because of the vision that it controls. Look at this. All of Even and Death has to cycle very wide to the left-hand side. Suddenly, that choke that Mike Udall is kind of moving to where Lutano is a very easy flank point over this. So both teams want to make sure that they have this into their control. Even and Death uses battery. He moves up. He's got the lockdown onto that. And now we have the temple. It's going to be started by Homicidal.
Homicidal on the temple point. Only one temple to have to deal with, and Even and Death has dealt with the bruisers, but that's kind of pushed a lot of the members of Even and Death back. And Gale Force Esports realizing that, trying to move on and see if they can catch somebody out before all of Even and Death can get into position. Brightwing's hanging out in the bottom, and Dahaka is there too.
Brightwing's going to try and TP in, but it should get interrupted. It very much does get interrupted there by Mikey Doll on bottom half of the map. Brightwing's running for her life. Gus is going to be used by K1 Pro. King Caffeine looks to get the initiation. Leaping strike over, but Fan, he gets the reset. Calamity value there. Divine Storm landing on the two Aegis is popped by Hal. He's going to be going down here along with Lutano. Frozen X quickly after. 5-0 wipe. Gale Force clean and shot.
Only battery remained. That was not for long as Gale Force Esports wipe the members of Even and Death, get to 20, step off the temple, and head toward the core. K1 Pro is going to fly down to the bottom and get the wave pushed all the way up as the rest of the members move to the bottom the old-fashioned way as they get into position to win game number 1 decisively. 10 kills to 1 over Even and Death.
The old-fashioned way. You know, back in my day, we used to have to click Z, stand still for a couple seconds, and then a magical horse would spawn underneath us so we could kill the core.
We had to run uphill both ways in a snowstorm in order to make it to our opponent's core.
Well, no matter how they did it, Gale Force made it to the core. Congratulations, and they are going to take game 1 over Even in Death. But again, you see the fight here from Even in Death in this very youthful roster.
You did. It really came down to that final fight. A lot of it was very good for Gale Force Esports so that they were able to get a fight just before 16, get a couple of kills, get the boss from that because of their quick rotations, and then take out a keep. But then even there was still opportunities that Even in Death could have come back in if they only were able to take that final fight. But stopping Brightwing from being able to teleport in, the gust was magnificent from K1 Pro to push everyone up into the corner. Divine Storm follow-up was there was no match for Even in Death to try to come back in that fight.
It was just a little bit too much from the coordination there of Gale Force Esports. But again, wasn't as much as I wanted from Gale Force Esports. If I was to put that in my mind, it was just kind of like Gale Force didn't meet it to the level, so it wasn't necessarily a win in my book for them. I'm still looking for that in game number 2. I want to see more offensive, less restricted. And again, You know, in bigger maps, I feel like is going to complement that. Maybe smaller even. Because even though Even in Death likes the smaller maps, I feel like Gale Force could just abuse that early game lead. And it's easier to be clear-cut in what you gain on smaller maps. Except for Tomb. That one, it's a little weird. Just don't waste your turn-ins, you know? It's just as easy as that.
Droid's got tough love for Gale Force eSports. Good job, but you can do better.
Yeah.
I want better from you in this next game.
It's like they came home with a grade, like a report card, and it was like flat C's.
A-.
Like you're cutting, A-. That's probably best.
That's much
Yeah.
closer
Yeah, you're right.
to what you're doing.
That's like at the threshold where it's like you're doing really well, and we see the effort that you're giving. According to your peers, you're in the excellent department, but I want to be the excellent plus. And that means just ruthless play there. They were 10-1 in terms of kills. Again, it wasn't that necessarily that close, but it was what they gave up in those kind of small windows, the timing of the shots, the cycling of K1 Pro. Those were the things I was kind of referring to.
Now, because Gale Force eSports are very dominant, very strong on large battlegrounds, I'm almost expecting the members of Even in Death to just